Hi, my name is Blair Dean. I'm the drafting teacher at Hoggard High School in Wilmington, North Carolina. I do teach all 5 courses that we offer. I teach on level and honors drafting 1, architecture 2 and 3, and engineering 2 and 3. This is my 13th year teaching in education, 8 specifically in our cluster. I am a nationally board certified teacher as well as cluster lead for the county here in New Hanover County Schools. I have a passion for taking best practices in pedagogy and, infusing it into our curriculum, specifically into the drafting curriculum. Today, we are going to, or in this session, we're going to be talking about unpacking your objectives and resources. We're going to look at kind of all of the resources that are out there and available to us and how we can find them and unload them and use them. So first, we need to talk about why. Well, NCDPI really, the Career and Technical Education Department within NCDPI has some set standards and things that they follow for what type of instructional things they provide for us through the instructional management program. And you can read through that. It's in order to provide strategies to teacher, get out essential standards, and we're going to break all of this apart. But NCDPI really focuses heavily on making sure our curriculum is out there. They have been working very hard over the last couple of years, and there is a lot of stuff coming out in the works right now to really bring everything kind of up to date. It is standard based and computer supported. So that is meaning their system. So that's all the things that they provide for us. And I will go through those and make sure you understand where each of those are. We also, it's important for us to look at the North Carolina best teaching practices standards, what we are graded on, and how does us looking specifically into our curriculum and unpacking it and making sure we're using all of our resources actually does check some boxes for us on our standards, so that you establish a respectful environment for a diverse population of students. Some of the sub-objectives underneath that, really knowing your content. Teachers know their content that they teach. Teachers facilitate learning for students. Teachers reflect on their practice. So you're not just, oh, here it is and go, but you're going back and reflecting and really pulling apart and piecing together what you need. And you contribute to the academic success of students. So making sure you are looking at all of your resources, for strategies and whatnot that is provided, as well as assessment techniques. Those are important. Really, the why. All right, so firstly, probably the big why would be consistency, just so that we are using the resources that are provided for us to make sure it's consistent across North Carolina. That somebody in the mountains is learning the same thing as somebody down here at the coast, that it's valid, that we are providing them with valid information. So using your resources, using the content that is provided to you and the curriculum that's provided to you, making sure it is valid. Some of that gets really tricky with the way that things have to be processed for through NCDPI and for the state. It takes kind of years for those things to kind of transgress. That doesn't really affect necessarily engineering quite as much or drafting quite as much. It definitely affects our architecture courses. So it's important for us to reflect on all of this constantly, making sure we are using the up-to-date resources and checking the validity of those resources, even on our own. Accountability, holding us accountable for what it is that we are teaching, holding the students accountable for what it is that they should be learning, and to make it easy. So you have something to use. I know when I first started in drafting, I felt like I was kind of treading and keeping my head above water because I just couldn't find a lot of the resources. Now that I've been involved in, locating resources, developing resources, and those sort of things, it has become much easier for me because they are starting to become available. And we're going to talk about the new stuff that's out right now, as well as some of the old stuff or things that you probably already knew about. So what are we going to go over today? First, we're going to talk about the Moodle, just a little bit, what it is, how we can use it. Next is going to be our course inventories. Those include our course descriptions, our enrollment information, and certification information. Our career pathways, our blueprints, which are our course user guides. Those include our essential standards, course percentages, RBT designation, we'll go over what that is, pacing, and local use. Our curriculum guides, that includes our culminating and essential questions, unpack content, activity strategies, and content literacy. Those have just recently been updated. Not sure if they'll even be out by summer conference, but you will be getting a first look at those or in-depth look of what has just been released. Our equipment lists, which are provided, textbooks, our software resources. Those are specific to our software, not just our content. There's Autodesk or SolidWorks, and additional training resources. SchoolNet for our assessment and testing. And then, of course, Skills USA, which is our specifically tied to us, our CTSO, Career Tech Student Organization. All right, so our Moodle. Our Moodle is used to find your curriculum and blueprint. So everything that's that course management system kind of thing. So everything from NCDPI should be on there for us to find easily or access easily. It might be a link to something else, but that is there for us. That is being currently and collaborate with other professionals. That's our discussion forum. So if you have a question about something that comes up in the curriculum, or you have a question about a certain project that you want to do, or something specific, then there's that discussion forum that you can collaborate with professionals. I would urge you to make sure you're using the correct discussion forum. I know sometimes it's like an overall discussion forum, and I'll get stuff for days and days and days and days from automotive or something like that. As of right now, they're specific to drafting all together, and there might possibly be a change for them to be specific to architecture and specific to engineering. The entire website for NCDPI and how our Moodle works, which is NC State is actually the one that produces that website, is under construction. So we should see some updates to that soon, if not already by summer conference. All right, our course inventories. These are specifically available and determined by your public school unit, or basically what used to be your LEA. Now it's being referred to as a public school unit, and you can even see on like some websites that hasn't even been updated to read PSU. But if you see that, all that is just the new word or new acronym they're using for LEA. So that's basically your school system. So what is offered within your school system is specific to your school system. So there might be something that's offered throughout the state that the state has developed curriculum for that is not offered within your school system, or that maybe you need to talk to your school system, talk to your central office, talk to your school board about possibly getting something added that is already available. This is what one kind of looks like. This is within the overall. So what your school probably does is pulls this from NCDPI if they put it within their own inventories. And the information that's included on this is information such as the course number, maximum enrollment. That's a real specific number that we want to make sure we're paying attention to, so they don't stuff our classes full of 30 to 35 students, because our classes are really, we do a lot of project-based learning, self-assessment, things that take a little bit, I don't know how to say this without saying, we don't need a lot of kids in our class. Plus, we have to have computer and technology access for all those students. And so the maximum enrollment that you should have in your class is 25. Hours of instruction, 135 or 150, depending on your block or regular schedule. There's no longer a prerequisite for drafting one. There used to be, but however, that has been taken away. I do encourage my students, and I encourage my CDC and I encourage my counselors and anybody who is placing students into classes, especially if it is my honors drafting one class, that they do have some foundational, at least geometry, decent math student, that sort of thing. There's the Career Tech Organization, Skills USA, aligned industry credentials. So for drafting one, that is Autodesk certified user. And then the description of the course, and then you've got some other information underneath that. And you can look through what each of these are for each specific course that you teach. I just pulled up drafting one, so we can kind of go through exactly what it looks like. But you can look specifically, and I'll give you time at the end to go into each of these areas and look specifically at what each area reads. Our career pathways. So it is important for us to know where our careers are or our classes are on the career pathways. So if we're looking at the architectural career pathway, you can see there are some middle school grade classes that can help teachers help students get into this pathway. Um, there is no prerequisite, like I said, but if we're talking about the architectural pathway, drafting one is a prerequisite for that. And you can see into that. We also want to make sure we're taking note of some of those supplemental employability skills courses and the supplemental technical skill courses. Because what we really want to do is if we have a student and we know that they're super interested in architecture, then we want to advocate for our students to make sure they're taking some of those other classes like you see below, possibly taking a project management class if it's offered, taking Microsoft Word and PowerPoint or career management, if they need those type of classes. So speaking up for our students and letting them know and we know, what this pathway looks like. Our engineering pathway, same type of thing. Drafting one's a prerequisite for two, and then obviously for three. There are some more middle school classes available for engineering that kind of feed into our classes in the engineering pathway. And then we also have our supplemental employability and technical courses. Also in our career pathway, just so everyone knows, they might not be aware, I think it's important for us to know what we are a supplemental tech course for. And for the interior design pathway, we are a supplemental course as in drafting one. So if there is a student who is taking the interior design classes, say they've maybe made it through the pathway, they've gotten a concentrator, reaching out to those other teachers and saying, hey, maybe they should take drafting. Because this will help them on their pathway to success. All right, our blueprints is our next resource that we are going to look at. I'm only going to look at, this is drafting one. So you can go back, like I said, later and look specifically at each course if you need to and look at what it looks like. Now, on the blueprints, usually above this is information that is in what we already looked at, the maximum number of enrollments, the hours, all of those sort of things is the information above. But what I want to make sure we concentrate on today is looking at and unpacking or breaking down the essential standards and our indicators. So that's the first part here. And essential standard is like the 1.00, 2.00, 3.00. That's the big idea. And we refer to the smaller, the 1.00, as the indicators. So when we are talking about these, these are basically like our units and our subunits, but they are referred to as essential standards and indicators. And everything we do in class should be driven by these right here. As long as we are covering this, we're good. If we have extra, okay, but we want to make sure our class and our curriculum and everything we're doing is driven by this document. We also have our course weight. So it tells us how much of the course we should be kind of concentrating on each unit. It does not break down the indicator scores because sometimes you need a little bit more flexibility in covering one indicator over another depending on your class. And it's important to, teach to the actual students that you have. So, like I know, for example, we spend way more time on 4.02 creating drawings and reviewing geometric shapes than we do on plotting 4.12. But all of that together, 80% of the course. We then have our RBT designations. That is the revised Bloom's taxonomy. So basically, it's telling us where on the Bloom's taxonomy or how intellectually students are thinking about that. So let's look at these real quick. So 1.00, you can see it has a B2 designation, and you can see everything in there is understand. Whereas 3.0 and 4.0 have C3s, and all of those are applying. So if we look at Bloom's taxonomy, you can see the cognitive process. So we've got remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. And then we have the knowledge dimension. Is it factual knowledge? Is it conceptual knowledge? Procedural knowledge or metacognitive knowledge? And those really are assigned the B's, the C's, the D's, the E's, the F's, the 2's, and the 3's, and all of that. So when we are talking about B2, right, the understanding conceptual knowledge, when we're talking about C3, they are applying procedural knowledge. Now, our students within that still analyze, evaluate, and create, though, and they still remember. So it's not necessarily only what designation it is, but we want to make sure we are at least hitting that designation. So within rough sketching and lettering, they're not just understanding what rough sketching and lettering is, but they're actually applying rough sketching and lettering. Now, if they also create or go above that, great. And then last is the column for local use. That is actually where you can set kind of your own pacing guides. So they leave that open as a place for your local kind of cluster, your local county, even if you're the only one or you have others to work with to kind of set your pacing guide over there. Now, I developed the pacing guides for New Hanover County schools. That was not the easiest for me to use there, but it is there and available for you. Just make sure you do have some type of pacing guide that you are making sure you're hitting all of your essential standards and indicators. Next, we have our curriculum guides. These are the big ones. These are the new things that should be coming out ASAP or might already be out by the time summer conference comes, since this is a recorded session. Our curriculum guides will all be newly released information, and they all look very different than they used to. They are organized by essential standards and indicators. Within each, you will see, so once you get, I'll show you what these look like. You've got your culminating and essential questions. There's unpacked content, activities and strategies, and there's content literacy terminology. So I'm going to let me find the drafting one to start with. So here's the drafting one curriculum guide. And it starts with an introduction. You can read through that at your leisure. It explains what each of these things are, what the culminating question, essential questions, unpacked standards, and then the vocabulary. It also talks about, guest speakers and additional resources that you might need. Then we go into each individual section. So you can see it's broken down by essential standard and then the indicator. For each of these, we now have a culminating question. So what question are you answering overall? I know a lot of school systems now are requiring that you have these posted with whatever it is that you're covering that day for students. And it's important for the students to understand what it is they're learning and why they're learning it. And that is these questions. So the questions are here for you. And then within understanding BIN and rapid prototyping, there is unpacked content. You can see you're going to define major terms associated with the drafting cluster, and then you're going to understand concepts related to the drafting cluster. So that's kind of the first piece to each section of the new curriculum guides that's broken into the essential standards. And then we have our instructional activities. And our instructional activities include the content literacy terminology. That is a list of terms that go specifically with each indicator. I'm sorry, yes, with each indicator. When you scroll down, you can see those, and it has definitions that you can use. Now, you can use those to develop your own activities if you want, your own strategies if you want, or you can, use it for assessment if you want, but they are just there and available so that everybody has a common um, definition that they're working from. These are pulled from, the International Building Code, the Residential Building Code. They're pulled from industry standard documents. They're pulled from Autodesk. They're pulled from previous curriculum that was written. So that is available. Then when we get to each activity, so each unpack content define major terms associated with the drafting cluster, including BIM and rapid prototyping. So this activity, and you can see this one has a note, it combines with indicator 1.02. 1.02 is the lead sustainable design, that one. So it's, basically this activity covers both of those. The activity name, so student exploration terminology research project, it has teacher instructions, it has student instructions, and then it has access to the actual resources. So up here it says provide terminology PowerPoint presentation project instructions for independent work and research projects. So this is what you're providing to students. And then it has student directions as well. Next, unpack content. Here's the activity, teacher instructions, student instructions, and then the resource that goes along with that activity. Some of them also have website examples. So this activity, the students have to go and find other activities or have to find resources, and you provide resources to them. So there are examples of resources given for BIM and rapid prototyping. These are articles that the students would go to or websites that the students would go to learn more. As of the print of this, these are up to date and working. In the future, they might not, so you might have to find something similar. And then it goes from there. So 1.02, it has your culminating and essential questions. It has each of those broken up. So your unpack content. Now your unpack content matches your essential questions. So you can see define major terms associated, and then your essential question pretty much matches that. So how are the major terms that are associated? And then your resources are included for each of those. Now, when we get to software specific things, find the first one of those, which should be a 4.0. You can see some of them say the activity is just software tutorials, and you facilitate students completing video or written tutorial sessions which align with the current version being used in your PSU, that's your public school unit. The tutorials were not specifically given because across the state, some states are using, 2020, some counties are using 2020, some counties are using 2021. I know there's a couple that are still using like 2018, maybe even past. So we couldn't necessarily give specific software tutorials, but I will give you at the end of this presentation access to some additional resources to find those types of software tutorials. So if you see something about the software tutorials, there is the CAD resource there, and there are other great resources out there for those. Otherwise, it has the activity for you, and this is something new that I know did not happen, or we did not have very much of until recently, so these are going to be great. Then we have also our engineering. Engineering 2, definitely the curriculum guide is written so that it builds into 3, and then 3 is written so that it reads in back to 2. It has resources like the others. It has the content literacy. It has your indicator, your culminating and essential questions, and it has, same type of notes about software tutorials, those specific to what your PSU is using. Engineering 2 and 3 speak a lot to design projects. And then architecture 2 and 3 also speak to design projects in that the curriculum guide is written in a way that architecture 2 actually develops a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath type house, and it's project based. So as you go through your curriculum, you are creating a project. And Engineering 3 does the same, but with a model home project and then a culminating commercial project at the end. So those are located in those as well. And if we look, for example, in Architecture 2, it speaks to that up here in the introduction. It has project and it has sample rubrics for each of those projects, as well as information on getting started on the project. And then in Architecture 3, it has the project pacing and then a document for getting started on the project as well. But just know that the architecture classes are now reading, and the curriculum is written for them to be more of a project-based learning course. All right, so these now have lots of information. If you haven't looked into these yet and they are released at this point in time, we are working very hard to get those released as soon as possible. Then that's probably what you're going to want to look really in depth into at the end of this presentation. Equipment lists, these are available from your local central office. They are established by the state, but we have been told that you have to be provided those by your local PSU. So make sure if you need an equipment list and you need to check and make sure you have the available resources that they should be providing you for your courses, that you get those from your office. Textbooks, they're coming soon. Woohoo! So there is a committee working. I don't know if they've started yet, or what's kind of going on with where they are in the process. I reached out to someone for some questions on that and did not hear back at this time that I'm recording this. But there is a group getting together to look at a textbook or a recommended textbook for statewide. I'm hoping that these will be more specific to software than it will necessarily to content, but we will see what they decide on that. They should be coming soon. All right, software resources. Again, because every county is different, every PSU is different. The software resources for specific software tutorials really are dependent upon what your local decides and what is available to you. Now, Autodesk obviously has tons of resources that you can use, SolidWorks as well, coming directly from their industry stuff. So those are available. However, I would recommend possibly talking to your PSU about purchasing some type of supplemental, like a supplemental tutorial system or training system to go along with Autodesk. I know here in New Hanover County, we got together and we looked through a couple of resources a couple of years ago, and we selected Solid Professor and Geometrics. However, there are other resources, LinkedIn, Udemy, CAD Training Online, Course ERA, and lots of others that provide tutorials. Some of them are just video tutorials. Some of them are video tutorials that have projects that go along with them. Some of them are video tutorials that have projects that go along with them that also have questions that can go along with them. Some of them integrate with maybe a learning management system. Some of them do not. So looking at what really your need is specifically in your county or within your PSU and then selecting those. But there's some examples of ones. There are, like I said, additional ones out there. There might even be a new one I don't know about yet. So those are being developed, especially in the climate we were just in. People are really developing some good online tools for us to use. I know specifically there's still holes in some of these. So I create my own software tutorials or software project type things that teach the students the software as they're developing a project in order to cover some of the blueprint that may be missing from our curriculum. Not missing from our curriculum guides, but outlined by software tutorials by our curriculum guides. SchoolNet is obviously another resource that we have out there. SchoolNet is basically just item test banks for assessments. So it is a way for us to use item test banks, to create formative or summative assessments. Um, it's not, this is my opinion, it's not the most user friendly. I'm still learning myself how to work with it, manipulate it quite the way I want. So I do use some supplement stuff on the side of that. I ask to be provided, and our PSU does provide access to kia.com, and there's some other online assessment type places. But the bank is there for you to use if you would like to take it and manipulate it into something else. Just do remember that you are not allowed to release those in any way. So they do have to be password protected. You can't like post them on your website or something like that. And then Skills USA. Skills USA is our CTSO. There's the national and state Skills USA. They actually do have some project-based or curriculum type things you can use specific to our classes or to supplement and project type things, practices, and whatnot you can use within your classroom to bring in the Skills USA. All right. I would like to say thank you to everyone for listening today. Hopefully, you learned something new about some of the resources that we have and that are available. If you have any questions about those, you can email me at blair.dean@nhcs.net, or you can check out my website there at the bottom. This presentation will be made available, so you can click on some of those links and other things within it. Um, and we are in the process of supposedly hiring a new person at NCTPI central office for us. So that person will be a great resource when they are hired as well. If you didn't hear, Craig Pendergraph did retire. Good for him. I hope he is enjoying his retirement and time off, and we look forward to meeting our new replacement for him. So now I would like to provide everybody with some time at the end of this session to explore, create, plan, organize, whatever it is that you need to do with any information that maybe you got from here. Maybe you haven't visited the Moodle in a while. Maybe you need to relook at a specific blueprint, or email and ask about equipment lists, whatever it is that you need to do during this last little bit of time, or email me with any other questions. Thank you so much for your time.